just before we start, my managing director has still not been able to reach the office.
Okay.
Because he has got, he wanted to connect from his device. I said that no, it's better you come and meet her from your office. It's better. So
That's fine.
he couldn't come till now. So I will conduct the whole thing. I will discuss with you, and I think that would be sufficient in any case.
All right.
So hi students, I think we have already got around 50 of them, 29 of them, and as we proceed, I think we'll get more of them. We are expecting around 120, 125 odd people listening to you today. Just to brief you students and faculty, you are now listening to someone who is referred to as one of the doyens of publishing industry. For the last 20 years she had been there, and she's also the founder, as you are already aware, her background. She is the founder of Editrix.ai, and she has worked exclusively with top-notch writers, authors across the globe. And today we are indeed very happy and privileged to get her among us. As you have heard a lot many other industry stalwarts, she will be talking about her industry. She's from publishing industry, so she will be talking about how AI is changing the landscape big time. I will not take much time because her time is very constricted. Ma'am, if you can give a few opening remarks, and then we'll start talking about with the specific questions that I have in my mind, and then we can take it off from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhattacharya. I appreciate it. And thanks for inviting me for this event. And I can't see many of your faces, but I just wanted to say hi. I'm sure you must have heard a lot of hype about AI. And so I thought what I would do is just demystify some of it for today. In terms of my career background, I think you already know enough about that you don't need to know anything more than that. But essentially what I want to say is that I started out as a traditional editor. I've always been a traditional editor at heart. And a lot of you must be wondering, what does an editor and publisher actually do? So what we do is, I always say to people, think of editors and publishers like makeup artists. So when you see somebody act in a movie, working behind the scenes is somebody who makes them look the way they do, but they should be invisible. So same with books, there's always a team of people behind the Nobel Prize winning author, the Booker Prize winning author, the people who make sure that the book is the best it can be, both of course in terms of the content, which is what comes in between the pages of a book, and of course the cover, the marketing, the positioning, the editing, all of that. So there's a lot which goes into it. One of my team once calculated that there are at least 400 moving parts to publishing a book minimum. There's a lot of moving parts. So editors and publishers take a book from concept to finish to the market, to readers. So ultimately what you're like the first reader of a book. You're the first person who reads the book and says, what's good, what's bad, so that when you as a normal reader who buys a book reads it, by then a bunch of different people have already done some of that background work for you. Editing, did somebody want to say something?
No, ma'am. You can continue because I think there are some glitches here and there. Don't worry, because there are so many of them there.
No problem.
And students are there in their sessions. So, it will be like, you'll have some bit of glitches.
That's good. No problem at all. So essentially one of the things which I had felt for a while is that the editing profession traditionally, it's not just about reading a book and giving your feedback. It's quite technical. So you have something in editing called style sheets, which are, quite technical applications of not just the rules of grammar, but each organization has its own style sheet, has its own way of doing things, and editors apply all of that. And I noticed for a long time that I didn't see a lot of young people joining the editorial profession, and that was making me quite sad, to be honest, because I started as an editor when I was 24 or 23 even. And I just couldn't see young people doing it. And I was trying to figure out why that was. And I realized there's a bunch of different reasons for it. And one of them is that it's a profession in which you have to be very highly educated, extremely well read. You have to have the patience of a saint, and you have to be wanting to be paid not very much. So obviously, it's not people aren't desperate to join this profession. But at the same time, I noticed that the number of people wanting to write books was skyrocketing. So I suddenly saw everybody wants to write a book, but nobody wants to edit them. So it was simple supply and demand gap that I saw. And around the same time, some of the earliest AI models were coming up. So this is before ChatGPT was even launched. They had research preview models, which I was experimenting with. And I thought, what if we can use AI to edit books? Because this is probably the last completely manual profession. Right now, the whole thing is done manually. The most sophisticated software application up until the time that I built mine, which is called Editrix.ai, is spell check. So apart from spell check, there are no tools available for editors. And I felt, well, that's kind of crazy because, with everything, there are some things that can be made easier through technology. And I felt that if we can ease some parts of the editing process by using technology, I felt, it would just make it first of all, a more attractive profession for young people, but also for authors, and make it more accessible to them, because currently, because editing is entirely manual, it's very expensive and out of reach for most people. So most people cannot afford or even get to a real, very, very experienced editor, because there's so few of them. And because there's so few of them, they're still expensive compared to, most people are not going to want to spend a few lakhs getting their book edited. They won't be able to afford to do it. So I wanted to build a more affordable solution and also a better solution, which is what I did. So that's my journey from now. So I'm one of those people, I do not see technology and creativity as mutually exclusive. I think every technology, when used well, has always made that skill, that profession better. I always compare it to, I don't know how many of you are scientists or mathematicians, but I always say, maths teachers really hated it when the calculator was invented. And at some point, you have to ask yourself that question, am I going to be able to solve bigger problems if I use my just pen and paper, or I use a calculator? And probably you're going to be solving better problems, harder problems, if you have access to some form of technology. So I think that, of course, all technologies have the potential for harm. But I think, anything which is very powerful comes with the potential for harm. So this is sort of my worldview around editing, publishing, and technology. And yeah, so any questions so far?
See, whatever you said, one thing is very clear. You need to be very passionate about this. Otherwise, you'll not be able to be there, because your returns, as you say, may not be always the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
So this is one particular area. I just wanted to, from the students' perspectives, for them to understand, how does it, how does AI, the way you are implementing it right now? There are multiple ways you can do it. One is content and all those. Even idea creation is also one area that even AI is being used. How do you think you are going to use AI, and how are you using it, and your tool that you have created? What are the dimensions by how you are actually implementing it and using to help writers as well as other stakeholders?
Okay, so there are 4 kinds of editing primarily out there. One is called developmental editing, which is the kind of editing which happens earliest in a book. I can't see many of you, but I'm assuming at least some of you will want to write a book someday. So when you have an idea and it's kind of nearly finished.
And no, actually, matter of fact, ma'am, since we are part of education industry, we write a lot of research papers.
There you go. So that's one application. So I work with a lot of think tanks. I'm already working with think tanks and academic publishers where, again, this is something very relevant to you. So let me focus on that rather than books. Is that I've noticed that outside the UK and the US, where you have very good academic editors available, sometimes the quality of the research being done outside those places is very high, but the finish of those papers is not as good. So sometimes the English won't be as good. It won't be done according to academic paper style sheets. The presentation may thoda sa we fall behind. Now I'm working with a lot of people to do affordable academic editing, so that if your paper is already at the highest level, your chances of getting published are much higher. Your chances of getting noticed are much higher. I'll tell you something, I don't know why this is, but it's a fact that you can have a paper which is very high quality conceptually, but if it's full of grammatical errors, people will not take it seriously. If you're not able to communicate your ideas clearly, however strong they are, people will not be able to understand it. So we are working with think tanks, academics, lots of people who have really good ideas but fall behind in presentation and in communication. So we will say, here's how you foreground your argument. These are the potential flaws in your argument. This is how you can address them. This is where you have contradicted yourself. This is where the flow of the article can be better. The references need to be done in a certain way. Things like this, which people really genuine, it's a real world problem. So I'm not one of those people who's sitting, I'm not creating a solution for flying us to the moon. I'm creating a solution for a very simple real world problem, which everybody has. So let's say for you guys, if you had 10 academic papers or research papers, and you wanted people to notice them, you say, well, this has potential, but the finish is not that good, then my product is built for that. It's built to take anybody's research, anybody's work, and help it be the very best that it can be. So does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, that does. But see, why I'm saying this, because academics, there seems to be of guilt in flaws. The moment you are making a mistake, all these days we had thought. Now suddenly after ChatGPT and all has come in, we have started to say no. A little bit of flaws are okay. It looks better, in fact, rather than having absolutely machine-led sentence syntax. The way it looks means it's almost like a similar. See, they have whenever you write content, so even ChatGPT, as simple as that, you will be observing there is a certain pattern to it, right?
Yeah,
and then it looks very much. Once you read it, you realize that it's written by machine.
100% agree.
Okay, so now, for instance, this research papers and all, you have a topic. There are some styles that has to be followed. All these things, humanly done, fine. You make basic changes there. But what do you do with the content part of it? Because the content is something, it has been derived through some primary data, and the logical reasoning has to get into. There is a way of connecting it through data. Here, there is a way of visualizing it through some tools. For instance, which are once again tools like Tableau. It can be Power BI. It can be any other tools. Then you create those. So there are. From AI perspective, how does it actually help in that particular domain? I can understand your peripheral aspects. That's fine. With sentence corrections, spellings, and
no, that is, in fact, I would say maybe I'm not explaining it well enough, but actually, of course, it does all of that, sentence correction, all of that. But what it does is it helps to find the flaw in your argument. Now, I always say, I don't think unless I would agree with you that ChatGPT writing is very easily detectable. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I feel that, you read it and it looks formulaic and boring.
Absolutely formulaic, mechanical.
What I have done with Editrix, my software, is I have trained on top of ChatGPT. So it basically, according to my own taste. So I have my own taste and experience as an editor of what I think works and what I think doesn't work, which isn't really a formula as much as a sensibility. So there are certain words, for example, like as an editor, I'm observant to, which, because a lot of organizations, institutions are still scared, if you ask me, of ChatGPT. So nobody's addressing it. So what's happening, in my view, and I've seen a lot of organizations do this, is they are either, what we call shadow use is happening anyway. So what's happening is people are using AI in the wrong way, and thereby getting the wrong results, right? But what I have tried to do with Editrix is train it to not do certain things. I'll give you a simple example. And please, if you take away nothing else from this talk, just remember this one thing. There are some words which are native to ChatGPT, okay? Like delve. Never use that word anymore. It's now a cliche. In conclusion, masterful, resonate. These are words as an editor I know are overused by cliche. But
Foster is also another word.
Enhance. So there are many words which are native and the most overused words. I'll give you an example of this happened with academic papers in medicine. Very interesting story that they did a study last year and they asked a bunch of people who were writing medicine-related academic papers, and they said, do you use ChatGPT? They all said no. 90% said no. And then somebody did a data analysis of all of the medical papers pre-ChatGPT and post just for the use of the word delve. Okay. So before ChatGPT, delve is like this, no one's using it. After this, in spite of everybody saying they're not using it, it's gone like that. Because of course everybody is. So my aim is use AI, but use it well, use it properly, learn how to use it. And for all the students and faculty in here, I would say this is a huge leverage, huge advantage for you. So learning how to use AI well, when it first came out, people thought you'll just figure out how to use it on their own. That didn't actually happen that way. Because the AI companies are not very good at communicating how to use their models. Somebody like me who spends at least 3 hours a day studying this, I know how to do that because I've dedicated a massive amount of my time and my career to doing just that. So I would say what I have done is I have trained on top of ChatGPT a certain set of behaviors to make it as natural as possible. So the editing happens. Editing is an art in which you intervene, but there are also places where you don't intervene. So when you edit something on plain old ChatGPT, it rewrites everything in its own style, and I hate that. So what I have done, it will not change your style of writing. It will not change your, but what it will do is it will take your full paper, the full thing, and it will say that, this is where you have contradicted yourself. This is a flaw. It's trained to say, here's where a peer review might take objection to what you're saying. So the idea being, it will give you the chance to fix as much of this as possible yourself before you put your work out in the world. I think, as an editor, I can tell you I've worked on hundreds of books in my life. And the difference between those which have editorial work has been done and those where editorial work has not been done is like the moon and the sun.
True, very true.
So that is what it does. So it doesn't just do copy editing and proofreading, which it does very well, but it does structural editing like a real editor would and say that, well, you've made this argument, but on page 5, you've contradicted yourself. In the end, and I'll give you another very common thing which people don't realize. Again, I'm sure all of you will go on to write academic papers. This is something which I've seen with writers across the board, not just academics. Sometimes when somebody knows a subject very, very well, very common problem which I see, they sometimes don't say the most obvious thing because to them it's so internalized, and to them there's something they know so well that they forget that the reader doesn't know it. So things like that, which are not what ChatGPT is trained to do, but I have trained it to do, are the kind of things which it does. Like I've seen this, like I see it at least half the writers that I work with. If someone is an expert on, I don't know, like foreign policy or India's foreign policy, they'll say everything but the more obvious things. But to contextualize your work for an external reader, you need to say those obvious things, otherwise they won't understand what you're saying. True. So things like that, which is like only an experienced editor knows, those are the kind of things that, that I used it for. But for me, like the most important takeaway from doing this work now for 2.5 years, really, is that I encourage every student, every faculty member, and frankly, everyone to learn all of the best practices to do with AI, because it is a huge advantage for you. Sitting in India, you have the opportunity to take your work to the top level. So use it, because you don't always have that. And this is like, I always say, like, if you imagine the Industrial Revolution, any history students in here? Anybody who's studying history?
No. We are into business management and essentially management. And
even more important for business students than history students. So since you're not a history student, let me give you a little short story about a business practice, which led to the Industrial Revolution. So as you know, you had manual labor. You had people doing embroidery and stitching or whatever. Everything was done through manual labor. Through the Industrial Revolution, machines came in and replaced humans doing manual labor. Everyone with me so far? What you're seeing now, and you're at the very beginning of, but it's going to happen so much faster than the Industrial Revolution, is you're seeing the same thing with the Industrial Revolution, which happened with manual labor, but with cognitive labor. So cognitive labor will become cheap in the same way that manual labor became cheap after the Industrial Revolution. So this is not an irrelevant historical fact. This is a business thing that you need to know. And why do I need to know this? Because I see this with some university students, other places. A question I get asked is, my intelligence is better. human intelligence is better. And I have a genuine view on this. And my answer to this is, unless you are at the very, 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 very top of your profession, no, it is not. And you're better off accepting that and using all the tools that are at your disposal. So, for example, if you're going back to the Industrial Revolution and you go and say, if you are the world's greatest, embroiderer, you could probably still have a job. But when machine embroidery came in, you need to be able to use the tools to operate machine embroidery.
So at that time, your job would get easily replaced by the machine.
But it doesn't gets replaced by an operator who knows how to use the machine.
Exactly.
So be that
that's
person.
The challenge, yes.
I'm saying it's an opportunity. Be the person who knows how to use the machine rather than the person who says, I'm better than the machine, unless you're the top 0.0001% of people who's actually better than a machine.
But don't you think that using a tool is one thing and one being creative? Suppose you are a writer. When you write something, when you're creating something, and then you're using a tool, what do you do actually? You make it better by doing, once you are changing the sentences? What is it there? Because your ideas, whatever way you are putting it across. For instance, I saw some English writers. Look at an Indian context. They are trying to translate an Indian context through English language, giving it to the people. Now, how do you think? Because I am very interested to know as publisher, since when you look at those manuscripts, what goes into your mind? Because see, you are using machine all right, but once the context of Indian context, you are trying to put it in English words, putting it across to people. How do you think through machine you are able to, or through a software program or something, you are able to enhance its quality? In what? Can you just give me one example? And for the students also it will be easier for me.
Absolutely. So that's a really good question. I find that when you're trying to communicate a very Indian idiom in English, 90% of the time, even without the machine, forget the machine for a minute. Let's assume I'm talking about the time before we're using machines. People mess this up very badly. I'll give you an example of a book once which came to me when I was at Penguin. And let's see if anyone can guess what it was. The sentence used was, she ate black lentil donuts. Can anyone tell me what this is?
I can't.
Vada. Talking about a vada. Okay.
Achha.
It's a terrible way to describe it, right? No machines were involved in that terrible description. Only a human was involved. So I personally say, don't think about whether the improvement was made by a human or a machine. In terms of good taste, we know what is good taste. Hard to define, but you know what it is. Aim for good taste and figure out how to get there with a combination of human and machine. Don't use one exclusively. Use what is available to you. So let's say that lady who wrote that sentence, she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. So human taste is subjective. Now, I as a professional can tell you I definitely think something was wrong with it, because I know that people will laugh when they say that you all must be like black. If I tell you come to my house to eat a black lentil donut, you're going to say, you'll think I'm pretentious, because you're going to think, well, she's trying to make foreigners understand her. That's what it is. Lots of things come into play. So something like that typically, or let's say if I come across, one of my users sent me this comment. She wrote a book about partition and she was using the software, and she told me something interesting, that it gave her some feedback which was quite personal. So imagine you get same piece of feedback, one from a machine, one same feedback. I also got this feedback, but she also got it from the human, from the machine. And the feedback was, she sounded very petty and mean-spirited in certain sections of the book. And she did. She was being petty and mean-spirited, and which is fine. It's a memoir, she can. But as an editor, my job is to say, this is how you will look to your reader. Now, whether you choose to look that way, fine. But it's my job to point it out to you and say, I don't know if this is your intention, but this is how it sounds to me as a reader. So, and she said she didn't listen, and then she said machine said the same thing. Then she said, but the strange thing was, when I said it, she got a little bit touchy, didn't like it. But when the machine said it, she was totally fine. She said, when I said it as a human, she felt attacked. But when the machine said it, she didn't think it was anything personal. And she did it. So I don't know whether there is an answer. I think we're all learning. I don't know that I know the answer to your question, but what I do know is this is a time to experiment and figure it out and not take absolute positions, because I think for the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see so many changes that it's too early to say what is exactly the right way. We're all figuring it out. So my advice would be, I don't personally think that a human alone approach is necessarily better at understanding nuance. I think one of the things machine learning is very good at, and AI models are very, very good at, is having a very keen ear for tonality and for understanding, sort of how something sounds, because that's what they're trained to do. So in that, I wasn't expecting to find them being really good at that, but in fact, they are very good at that.
Ma'am, one thing, I think Molly wants a question to be answered, right? Molly, you have a question? Molly had just raised a hand.
Go ahead.
Molly, if you have a question, please ask. I'll go to the next step. Yeah, Molly, yes. You switch on your video. Yeah.
And maybe you're on mute.
Molly.
You're on mute.
Yeah, because then you'll have a lot of sound, because few of them are sitting together and they are connecting through one device. So that's the reason you'll find a lot of cacophony. I didn't want to do that.
I'm not sure how much.
Molly, please ask a question to ma'am. Yes. Yes, Molly, ask. Yeah. What happened? Hello.
Sorry, sir, by mistake.
Sorry? Yeah, quick.
Huh? Sorry, sir, press the button by mistake.
Oh, press the button by mistake. Fair enough. You can switch off the video because it will take your bandwidth. Yeah. Okay, ma'am, I think some of them is that's it. I want to go to the next section, which is a very critical one. And that's something that has been biting a lot of people across the industries, it's not only publishing. And that is on the legal and ethical issues. What are the areas that you think are the ones that you are facing, and what are the areas that you are addressing in this? Because since you are one of the pioneers in getting into the AI models and all this stuff. So if you can just brief us a little on this.
Okay, so that's a really great question, and I think one of the most important questions. I think that the original sin of AI is its use of copyrighted material. So as you all know, that if it's well known in the public domain, that a lot of these models were trained using pirated books, right? But not just that, they were essentially scraped the entire internet and learned from that. That's what they did in the first generation of AI models. So obviously the legality of that is being questioned in courts around the world. At the same time, what we are seeing, and so that's the legality of it. So far, nobody has won a case yet, so far. But obviously this is an ongoing discussion. What I find more interesting, and I'm watching, in terms of the misuse of copyright, obviously I'm against that. I think that AI companies should pay authors for what they use. And my understanding is a lot of the big publishers are currently in negotiation with the AI company and authors to make that happen. For example, some of the very big academic publishers have already tied up to legally do this. So Springer, all of the Springer group have already done that. So this is something I'm almost certain you will see a lot more of. Another interesting thing about copyright is that some countries outside the UK outside the US, and I think already including the UK, this is what I think will happen there, like Japan, for instance, have made the use of copyrighted material for the training data legal. So what's going to happen, in my opinion, is you're going to see the training move to places where this is legal. That's one. The second is that the newer generation of models that you're seeing are not trained on copyrighted data. They're now trained on something called synthetic data, which means they create their own data to train themselves.
Right.
That is a big change. That is, of course, not illegal. That is completely legal because it is new synthesized data, which is synthetic data, which is being used to do that. So that is one. Now, how I see this in terms of ethics, obviously there are questionable ethics around the use of anything which is copyrighted and you're not using it without full permission. And for example, did you know, and since we're in students, did you know that you're not allowed to photocopy books? That's not allowed. That's illegal. Recently in India, there was a case which was fought, and the academic publishers lost. So now it is legal in India to photocopy books for students. So the legality changes all the time. So I don't think it is fixed. In terms of ethics, definitely there are some ethical questions around the use of it. But I would say as an individual, and you're all individuals, I'm an individual, I would say don't let that be a reason to not understand this technology under any circumstances. I'll tell you why I think that. I'll give you a comparison. There are many things out there which you are, let's say fossil fuels, okay? Questionable legality, questionable ethics. But until you're in the position to be in such a powerful position that it doesn't matter to you and you can afford to go fully solar, you will have to use it to live in this world. So as a student, I can't in good conscience give you this advice and say, don't touch this because it's unethical, any more than I can say, don't get into your car because that's unethical and it's leading to global warming. If you can afford to be like Mark Zuckerberg and burn up the world's fossil fuels and then live in a solar farm with organic food, great. But most of us are not in that position. True. And we have to live in this world. And I'm a very practical person. And I feel more than ever, students will need to be resourceful and practical to succeed in this world. I always say the age of intelligence is wrongly labeled. The intelligence will become very cheap, but agency will become more important. So your agency means how you can do things on your own using the resources available. I always say, don't call it the age of intelligence, call it the age of agency. Because we are traditionally brought up into thinking our intelligence is what makes us special. Just like an embroider 400 years ago would have been brought up thinking his skill in embroidery is what makes him special. And then it wasn't. Same thing's going to happen to us. So we need to prepare. Before the embroiderer was doing that, more than 1,000 years ago, men, and I say men because in those days it was only men were valued for their physical strength. And then they weren't when machines came. So you'll have men who adapted and became better at other things, and men who only, focused on their physical strength. And how many of those do you think survived? So I would say, as speaking to you as students, in all conscience, I have to tell you what you need to do to survive rather than what, any more than I can say, like if you can afford to only drink fair trade coffee, ethically produced, which is 10 times the price. If you can, good, but not everybody can. And you shouldn't feel bad about it if you can't. You have to survive in this world, which is the toughest work environment anybody has ever seen. So you have to use all of the tools which are out there. That's the most important thing I was hoping to tell you today. So that's sort of my view on it.
Ma'am, the last segment I would like to ask you about how can publishers and authors leverage AI effectively? Since publishers you have already said. For the author side, if you can give a few more insights, how they can do. Because when I say, there are two ways. One is that the academic side that we have already dealt with. Where also you have started with the different editing texts. One was developmental that you said. And what are the other aspects of editing side that you didn't pursue? If you can give an idea on that. Plus, how does the authors of various, it's not only academic, non-academic also, fiction, non-fiction, how do they leverage that? If you can give some inputs.
There's actually a lot of ways. So I was speaking to a group of academics a few months ago, and they were asking me the same question. And I remember a time about 20 years ago, 15 years. And those days, academics had to go. I don't know if there's anyone in the faculty who's of my vintage, but they had to go to a library, do the research, write down the citation, type it up, blah, blah, blah. Then Google came, and then people started using Google as a tool of research. And just like we are talking now about, the ethics and the, should you use that? Is it real research? Those days, people used to say that's not real research. Now tell me how many of you today will do your research without checking Google? Nobody, right? Nobody will do that. So the first thing authors should use AI for is research. There are currently very, very good tools available for free out there. Google has made a bunch of very, very good tools for research. So use those. That's the first thing. So, and you're probably going to ask me, why do fiction authors need to research? I always say fiction authors need to research more than non-fiction authors, because you have to do a lot of world building and you have to make sure your details are correct. So number one is research. So when you're at the ideas and concept stage, you will research the book itself, but also the other books. You can use that to research what else is out there about your book. Because before you send a book to a publisher, you have to really do some deep research to make sure you're saying something new and original, because you don't want to spend like 2 years writing a book and then find out that everything you've said has already been said in somebody else's book. So the number one way to use AI right at the very beginning is research. Next, use it for ideation. Use it for editing, for writing your book. I always say writing, most people will want to do themselves, because that's the urge of the writer. In fact, I see so many AI tools out there to help you write your book, and I deliberately did not make that for myself, is because I don't think people want that. People like writing. Like they're doing it because they like it. So it's like, I never wanted to make a tool which will sing a song for you, because people want to sing a song themselves. They don't want somebody to sing it for them. They of course want to make them sound better with editing the song and everything, but they do want to express themselves. That's the whole point of writing. So I always say, write it yourself and then use AI to make it better, because if you don't write it yourself, you won't be original. So all the originality, everything, that's where you come in. And that's the best form of AI and human interaction. Use all the tools, but the originality, creativity, angle, position, what you have to say is all yours. Never give that up to anybody. And then again, use AI to edit, clean up, fix, finish, polish, make it the best it can be. Then again, you can use it to research who to submit the book to, share it with people. There's so many tools out there where you can share. So these are all the different ways in which authors, and you can use it for marketing your book also. There are so many ways that today there are AI tools for marketing books. So there's a bunch of different ways. You have to just be open-minded. And I actually think there are more tools available, which also makes it a bit scarier, I know, because then you get confused and you're thinking, which one should I use? How should I use it? So yeah, so these are the different ways specifically for authors.
Okay. There is also one question regarding this. I was just thinking about this. This is just whatever you have discussed. There are so many dimensions to it. But what about this bias? There is always a bias in the AI algorithms, right? How do you manage that? What is it that how do you give us an insight?
What kind of bias would you say you're referring to?
See, for instance, just now you have said, right? You are doing it above ChatGPT. So there is somewhere you are thinking, your thought process is a reflection that comes into your, but that thought process is your unique thought process, right?
Yes.
So now you train the it's a machine learning story. You train the whole thing in certain way that actually reflects your vision, the way it's there. But there is also another person, right, who has a different way of thinking. He has a different. So there will be so many such things, right? So the machine learning itself, in my understanding, okay, so it will be unique to you. Then somebody else comes, somebody has a different uniqueness.
But I'm
how
saying,
do you manage it?
I don't manage it, because I'll tell you why. Because I don't think there's any such thing as objectivity. I think the point, you cannot eliminate bias from either humans or AI. You can't. What you can do is be aware of it and address that bias. Awareness of a bias is more important. I don't know a single person, myself included, who does not have some form of bias. All I can do is, and it's not like there's no machine I can put myself into and rid myself of that bias any more than I can put a machine and rid it of that bias. Also, these models are constantly evolving, right? So these are not standalone things. These are mirrors to us. Think of them like a mirror to us. It will reflect the same biases I have. So what I have to do is educate myself better on my own biases, spend some more time thinking about my own biases, and sometimes choose to have my own biases, because Not every book that everybody's writing should frankly aim to be objective. Memoirs, for example, or fiction are not objective. They're highly subjective by nature, and they should be subjective by nature. So it's, of course, with academic writing, that's different. There you address your bias in a different way. So educating yourself about each genre and understanding how bias fits into that, this is a purely human thing. I don't think you can train AIs not to have bias, but I don't think you can train humans not to have bias. So how are we going to train an AI if you can't train a human to do that? So I think that some form will always be there, but understanding it and being aware of it is the key skill to learn, I would say.
Okay. And what about now that you have already launched your product? It's already in the market. You are already using it. So can you just give me this is my last question to you. How are you building this business model for yourself? Can you give just an idea? Because I would look at it, I would liken you to someone as an entrepreneur who has got it to yes. You are absolutely in that. So as a very young entrepreneur, I just want to know.
No, I'm not very young. Very young and an entrepreneur is under the age of 20 and I'm more than double that age.
Doesn't matter. But why I'm saying when you start something new and absolutely new, I would rather call you a very young entrepreneur because that idea is young. But I don't think this is there because you are the pioneer in your own field, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
My question is, how do you? What is the plan? How do you actually look? How are you going to, use this particular thing, and how do you go to the next level in your business? I call it a business because publishing is business.
It is a business, absolutely. So you are all business school students. So let me give you some business advice from an entrepreneur perspective. Yeah. I think with the intelligence becoming very cheap, a lot of the career paths that were available to you are going to change very, very rapidly. So I saw that when I left my job because I felt that I wanted to build this. What I learned along the way around what this means. So there used to be something called SaaS, software as a service. So what I'm trying to do is also SaaS, but I'm trying to do service as a software. So what that means?
Hello, Lauren. Lauren. I'm just hello.
Lauren, please.
So I think that'll be the main, what people I'm sure you would have learned in your business school is what is a moat, what is a business model, all of this. I think consulting personally for me will be one of those professions where I see a big change happening as this kind of intelligence becomes cheap. But for me, it's a SaaS model, software as a service. People can license my software, they can buy it, they can use it, or I give them that service, which is a software supported service, which is a real growing model now, which means people want you to do it for them, but cheaper, better, more accurate, faster, because you're using a proprietary software. So that is the model. So we are doing both. Some people like, more tech friendly people like to do it themselves. Less tech friendly people would just say, look, I was paying this much for this service, I'm giving it to you, you give it for me faster, better, cheaper for less. So this is the business model. Service supported software, software supported service, and of course the traditional SaaS model.
Software supported service, because that is something new. Let me write it down because I forget.
Yes.
Software
supported service. Yeah.
Okay. Software supported service. Okay.
So essentially, we do the same thing, and
what sort of price points do you have?
So I'll send you a note on the front. Obviously, we have enterprise price points when we work with people who do a lot of work. We have a different thing. So just to give an example, to get a book edited using just the software costs about 30,000 rupees, 32,000 rupees or something like that, if you're using just the software. If you were to go to an editor, it would cost at least 3 or 4 times that much and would take much longer. If you want us to do it, it costs about 75,000 rupees. Again, it would cost a lot more if you want to get that done at the same level of experience.
Same with education.
These are full-length books. Huh? These are full-length books.
Full-length books. Okay.
So obviously, it's much.
Suppose our students write research papers and we want to, get your services. Research papers is only about 4-5
Yeah.
pages.
How long are the research papers?
For publication they use it for 3-4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages.
Yeah.
And it will happen in bulk in a sense. Let's say 10 students are doing it. So 40
Yeah,
pages.
so typically what we would do is we would say, depending on how many papers you have in a month, you would just subscribe. We give a quote depending on how long the papers are. So then we just have a simple calculation which we do. And we say, if you just pay us this much money per month, you then don't have to think about your editing. We have a cycle, you send it to us, we put it through the software plus the human. So the real human editor is also looking at it. It's not just giving the feedback, working with the author. And what we find is over time, it actually makes them better writers because they've learned what they're doing wrong. They've understood. So I don't think of it just as making the paper better. I think of it as making the person who's writing the paper better because they've understood and they won't make that mistake next time because they've learned it, you see. So if you like to use our service, I mean, of course, I'll happily send you a quote and everything. We work with some of the top think tanks in the country to do their papers. We do I obviously don't want to name, but definitely one of the top, maybe the top think tank in India. Every academic paper in there is done by us. And the people there are very, very high level, Nobel Prize level people doing, very experts in their field. And it works really well, and because they also want their paper to be the best. They also want to put out their best work. And that's really the impulse that I was trying to get at.
Good. Ma'am, you had already in the beginning given me a constraint of your time. 12:15 is
No,
what
I'm so sorry. I thought we were starting at 11. That's why.
Yeah. So I will not take much time. Any concluding remarks that you want to share with my students?
Yeah.
Suppose they want to start a career like yours. A few words on that, and then we will wrap up. I will not take much of your time because you're already 12:15, as Palak says me. So Palak already.
So what I would say to all of you is build your intelligence. The age of intelligence doesn't mean you won't need your intelligence because a machine has it. You'll need better intelligence. You'll need more intelligence to get the best out of the years that come. You are entering a workforce which is for the first time going to already have intelligence, which is, as they say, too cheap to meter. So develop your intelligence, develop your agency. There's never been a time when agency has been more important. Gone are those days where you can just sort of coast through few years. I mean, I would say my advice is, people ask me, what is the secret of your having done so much by my age? I'm 46. Honestly, there's no secret. The only secret is that I started early. I just started earlier than everybody else. And I see, this is my advice to you. Sorry if you guys don't like this advice, but I hope you'll at least think about it. But I see a lot of young people delaying work. So I see people finish their college and then they say, I want to travel the world. I want to do this. First, I want to do all the things I love, and then I will start working. What happens then is that people already have taken up the jobs which are at your level. What happens is it's easier to work harder when you're younger. Do the hard work as early as possible. Be the best at what you do as early as possible. Enjoy your life later. Don't try to have this bucket list or whatever they call it on Instagram where you finish all of the fun things and then settle down to work. That's too late. If you want to be the best in your career, start early and put in the work. There's no shortcut for that.
True.
But do it early. That's my advice. The earlier you get in, the longer you stick with it, the better you'll become. And it sounds boring, but that's actually what it is.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You have taken time, and I'm so sorry I missed that whole thing.
It's my pleasure.
And I'm sure the students are really, because today they are having exams also, and so within that they have squeezed this time about 1 hour. So, and you told me 12:15. We sharp you are around 12:16 right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. But I will remain in touch with you.
Please.
Through mail and all. And also, if there are any services that we can leverage, obviously we will definitely do that. And finally, one last word, that please keep in touch with us as well, because it's difficult to reach you. I can see that I have to always go through Palak, and Palak is
It's only because I was traveling. At this time, I was traveling up to London, so that was the reason she was coordinating.
I absolutely understand. My managing director could not be there, but he will connect to you shortly with a thank you letter. Thank you so much for being there, and let's once again sing together once again.
Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed talking to you. And please, if anybody has any questions, please forward them to me. I'll be happy to answer.
Sure, ma'am. I will send a mail. Yeah, I think our faculty, Dr. Shweta, she's the HOD for Business Management Department.
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Shweta Patnaik, you have something? Yes, Shweta, you want to ask something? Switch on your
yes,
video.
sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, I cannot switch on my camera, ma'am, because of certain network issues. I would like to ask you a very practical question, ma'am. Assign any segments to be taken care by the students in the form of assignments and all. So I can see maximum 80 to 90% of students they use so many AI tools like ChatGPT and all to just do their assignments and all. So do we really can facilitate our students that they can utilize this ChatGPTs and all to doing their assignments? It's a very practical question, ma'am, because whatever I am facing regarding facilitations and regarding anything related to my students. So I would really wanted to know to what extent we are supporting our students to do these assignments in the form of AI.
That's a great question, Dr. Shweta. So actually, what I really would advise is, and this I got asked this question at another think tank there was somebody who specializes in education, and my answer is always, before you come up with a policy, before you come up with a thing about how to use it with your students, take the time to train your own faculty. You become very good at it, you understand it well, then take a position. Because until the teachers themselves are not very, very well versed, you will not be in a position to help your students do this. So I would say, before teaching students how to use AI, I always say to every institution, let's do either a module or something to do a training with the teachers. Because when the teachers understand, they don't need people like me anymore, right? Because they already have the tools, they will be able to do it and devise the strategies which are right for them. So I sometimes work with an organization to say, let me do a session with the teachers, teach them everything they need to know, spend a couple of days doing it, and then they are empowered before doing anything with the students, because you don't want to teach them the wrong thing.
Exactly.
Let the teachers learn, let them be really good with it, and then the answers will come out of that. I don't know if that was the right answer, but this is kind of what I would advise. Rather than
means that machine learning has to be human learning.
Exactly, sir.
That's what it is.
We need to facilitate ourselves.
First the human, because I see too many places where somebody at the top will take a position and say, no, this is good, this is bad, but they don't know how to use it themselves. So before saying anything to a student, we must learn ourselves, and then you talk about how a student is using it. Then you'll be in a better position to have that conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we'll close it here itself.
All right.
And if there are any questions, ma'am, we'll send a mail to you.
Yeah, send an email, and we'll continue the conversation on email.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for giving
I enjoyed the conversation. Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.